Welcome to Tech Conversations with Chng, a podcast series by News on Tech, which aims to raise business leaders' technical IQ in horizon and future technologies. Tech Conversations will engage tech experts to highlight the technologies that have the potential to create substantial advancements in the future and significantly impact industries, economies, and societies. Today we have Miles Upton, a regional general manager for Asia, CapGemini. Welcome, Miles.
Thank you.
He has worked in several technologies across the board. Would you like to tell us what they are and how you got into this industry?
Sure. So I started off in 30 years ago working in electronics and industries like semiconductor and mobile communication. I've been in Asia more than 25 years, mainly working in East Asia, Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, Singapore, etc., and across different industries, automotive, semiconductor, mobile comms, etc.
Right. So that's an interesting career, and I'm sure you've seen many technologies come and go. But I think the technology that is now emerging clearly is quantum. I mean, apart from AI, which is the biggest elephant in the room, but I think quantum computing is the next technology that is quickly emerging. Now, quantum is slightly different from, well, not slightly, it is really different from classical computing.
Yep.
Yeah, but what can it do that classical computing cannot?
So I think we need to be clear about what quantum computing is, because there's this idea that a quantum computer is just a faster classical computer, and that's not the case. The reality is that there are certain types of problems quantum computers are very good for, and there are certain types of problems that classical computers are good for. And in fact, the world of compute is going to get more diverse in future, and we can talk about that later. But right now, there are, as I say, problems such as encryption, problems such as chemistry, where quantum compute potentially brings a whole new level of performance.
Right.
But at the same time, existing problems that you use classical computers for will continue to be the classical computing thing.
Right. So quantum compute is just one area, right? We have
Yep.
sensing and we have communication. So
Correct.
we are focusing on compute today.
Yeah.
So what industries will be impacted?
The challenge that quantum computers can break existing classical encryption methods, so asymmetric encryption, which is used by all of us every day for our banking, etc., that will be broken potentially it was demonstrated quantum computers can do that more than 30 years ago, in theory. In practice, it won't happen for 5-10 years.
Yeah.
But when it does happen, it breaks the data things.
Right.
So we need to move beyond existing approaches to data and encryption to deal with that threat.
Yeah, so there must be ways of doing this, right? So I think one way is for the standards to emerge so that to help companies guide them along this route, right? So I think NIST in the US have come up with 3 standards recently because the past couple of days. They are on key encapsulation and on digital signatures. We won't go into that, what it means, but it's actually post-quantum cryptography.
Yeah.
So how will this help companies?
So I think what it means is there will be standards that enable companies to manage their data in a way that won't be broken by quantum computers in the future. So what companies need to think about now is, well, how do they manage their data for this future post-quantum world? And why? One of the questions is people will normally ask is, why do it now? Because if quantum computers can only break encryption in 5 or 7 years' time, why act now? And the reason is because one of the things that is happening already is this concept of store now, decrypt later.
Right.
So if there are types of data which are highly valuable, for example, health records, etc., which will be valuable today and in 10 years' time.
Right.
So
you want to protect them.
You need to protect them. You need to think about how you protect your data now,
Right.
because your the people who want to decrypt that data will be looking at storing it now. They'll be scraping the data now, storing it, and then getting ready to decrypt it when the quantum computer can decrypt it.
And so putting into place the measures to prevent this from happening cannot be done overnight, right?
No.
So what do you need to do?
So I think for many companies, the first thing to do is to look at their current data, their data strategy, and how they classify their data. And typically, most companies will use. Typically, they'll use encryption for most data, but they'll use the same level of encryption for all data.
Right.
And what's needed is a different approach. So, you need to classify the timescale relevance of your data, and then think how you will protect that data, and how you look at post-quantum cryptography.
Right. So do you need special skills to do that?
Yes. I mean, I think this whole world it's still emerging. There are various ecosystem partners coming out. So there's the large companies like IBM, Google, NVIDIA, who are doing that, but there's many startups emerging.
Right.
And what companies need to do is understand the ecosystem. They need to understand who they need to work with. I don't think, unless very large companies, most companies will need to work with partners to do. Okay.
You know, Miles, the standards that they've just emerged are all about safety.
Yep.
How you can keep your data safe and how you keep your network safe. But quantum is more than just threats. It's also much more about opportunities, what we can do to benefit society. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So there are certain classes of problem where the advantage of quantum computers will enable us to solve things that we can't solve today. So if you look at, for example, the areas of chemistry, so novel materials, for example, how you design a better battery cathode. It sounds very obscure, but in fact the lifetime of batteries is a critical issue for sustainability, recharging batteries, etc. So designing a battery cathode involves very complex chemical simulation, but quantum computers will potentially solve that problem much more quickly.
So it would take, years on a classical computer?
Yeah, it may take, you may be able to reduce times by 1,000 times to solve a problem. So it's very much those kind of problems where you can also identify better solutions because you can run more simulations more quickly.
So chemistry is one.
Yep.
What other areas?
So, well, even within chemistry, there's many other areas. So probably the biggest area that many people are focused on is drug discovery. So you can think about drug discovery as a very expensive for the pharmaceutical industry is massively complicated and expensive, and the process is very long. And if you fail in drug trials, you can spend a long time then having to start again. So it's 10-year timescales. So if you can short circuit that and more quickly discover more potential drugs that will solve the problems, then quantum computer has a real business and society benefit.
Right. Apart from that, what about in financial services or in logistics?
I mean,
quantum help?
Logistics is a classic problem. So the traveling salesman problem is a classic problem in mathematics, where you're trying to find the best route to go from A to B, and those kind of problems. Optimization at scale, logistics, supply chain as well, for example. So logistics and supply chain obviously overlap, but you can see how to optimize your supply chain. And this is very relevant for today's industry. We've seen in the last 5 years with the pandemic and various other things that the logistics supply chain industry is critical to so much of the world economy, and any impact on it can drastically affect inflation, etc. So optimizing that is very desirable for the world economy.
Yeah. So quantum is not at scale yet. Quantum computers is
Correct.
not being produced at scale yet. So, but there are already solutions that are available. People are already implementing their solutions.
So people are implementing small quantum computers, but they are not yet at big enough to solve real real world problems.
Right.
So we're still probably at least 5 years away from that.
Right. Okay. So, what are the challenges for companies when they want to tell themselves, quantum is coming?
Yep.
How do I prepare for it? What are some of the challenges they need to address?
I think there's a number of things. There's expertise, there's tools, and there's workflow.
Right.
So I've worked in deep tech for 30 years. In most of my experience, the single biggest reason why deep tech fails is because companies need to change how they work to take
Right.
all the benefits of it.
Okay.
And quantum is a very good example of that. How you use a quantum computer in your workflow will be very different from how you use existing computers.
Right.
And you need to think about that and be prepared for how you will use them as part of getting ready to use them.
Okay. So is it about talent? Is it about people?
It's definitely about the people. It's about the people. It's about the ecosystem and the partners. So if you don't have the right skills to understand in your IT department, whatever department you want to put these skills in, you won't be able to understand how they will fit into your workflow,
Right.
and therefore the changes it'll make to your business.
Can you give an example?
So a good example of the differences in the workflow. So classical computers, you can copy data. So you can, for example, run a problem in parallel. You can
Right.
take the same data and run parallel.
Yep.
A quantum computer, if you copy the data, the same information, if you process it in one place,
Right.
that changes the other piece of information.
Right, yes.
That's the quantum effect.
Right.
Therefore, you can't just copy how you would work with a classical computer for a quantum computer.
Okay. So do you need to learn the technology, or do you pick this up just by attending conferences?
I think you need to understand the impact of the workflow. Whether you need to become, whether you need full, a load of quantum PhDs in your organization, probably not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to understand how this changes the workflow.
Right.
I think that's critical. That's the first critical thing to understand. And then you need to think what problem types in your business are useful to try and address with a quantum computer.
Right. Right. Is quantum solving problems for only large companies, or can smaller companies make use of quantum computing as well?
Anybody can make use of quantum computing.
Right.
I think the access to the quantum computers will always be, it'll cost money. It's expensive. Yeah. But the classifying the problem types is the critical thing. So today, because of the issues around, for example, data, you're looking for problems where the algorithm is very difficult, the compute problem is very difficult, but typically you don't need a lot of data. This is why chemistry is a good example.
Okay.
So you would not use it for problem types where there's a lot of data, because it's just so complicated in a quantum computer.
Singapore has been investing in quantum computing for quite a while. I think the Center for Quantum Computing is more than 10 years old. And just recently this year, they invested another $300 million, bringing the total investment thus far to $700 million. I think a lot of this money is going into training people, and that is important. So if I'm a business executive, I need to keep tabs, right?
Yep.
So what is the one signal that they should be looking for?
I think the signal this week with NIST announcing the post-quantum cryptography is a clear signal that now there's an opportunity to act. There's something to act upon.
Right.
I think the Singapore government investment, particularly in training people, there is a massive shortage of people who understand this.
Right.
And it's similar to AI, 5 years ago. The need for talent is critical.
Right.
But then beyond that, we need to look at how these algorithms are developing and the key developments. And lots of the developments are coming from startups, by the way, as well as the big companies.
So do you see this around Asia as well, around Southeast Asia and Asia?
So I think in Asia, the powerhouses in quantum compute traditionally have been Japan and China.
Right.
And we will see both those countries continue to invest significantly. So some of the big Japanese companies, NEC, Toshiba.
You don't hear much about them and their work.
Well, they are doing. I mean, NEC, Toshiba, Hitachi are all investing heavily in quantum. So, for example, there's a startup here in Singapore called Spectral, is partnered with Toshiba for quantum communications. And Hitachi has had the Hitachi Cambridge Lab doing quantum compute and quantum sensing development for more than 15 years, I believe.
Okay. So compute is where the action is at the moment.
I think compute is the area with the most industry relevance. The broadest industry relevance is where the threat is and also where the most opportunity is. Sensing and communications are relevant to certain industries.
Right.
So if you think about quantum communications, which is about securing communications beyond, against quantum breaking, quantum threats, then the opportunities are mainly for people like finance institutions who need to have or governments that need to have highly secure communication point to point, etc.
Okay. And sensing?
Sensing, there are applications, for example, in medical scanning. There's applications in navigation. So you can look at, using quantum magnetometer, you can map the Earth's magnetic fields, and then from that you can identify where you are relatively. For example, if you don't have GPS.
Okay. So if I want to bring the two giants together, AI and quantum, where do you think is the synergy?
I think the synergy is around where you can use AI to optimize quantum computers. So you can use it for example, post-processing data, but also pre-processing, how to identify the right way to enter the problem into a quantum computer, but also then post-processing data to help reduce. So we know that quantum computers have significant problems with error correction. Noise builds up in error correction. And one of the solutions for error correction is to use machine learning to look at the outputs and you deliberately introduce noise into the quantum computer and look how that changes the output. And then use machine learning to then try and identify patterns in that can then help to reduce the errors.
Looking ahead, now we know that quantum is an emerging future technology that's going to come quite soon. Is there another technology that we should be looking out for?
So I see another area where these things will overlap is with synthetic biology.
Right. Okay.
So in the future, we will see. So we're already seeing biotech being impactful in certain industries, but we're now seeing the AI being used to optimize biology, and as we discussed already, quantum will enable even more for that. So when these things start to interact, and I think that's where it gets very both very interesting but also very challenging for business. You need to be able to understand. You need to understand quantum. You need to understand AI, and you need to understand biology.
Great. So that is our next topic for discussion. Synthetic biology. Thank you, Miles, for joining us on this Tech Conversations with Grace Chng. This podcast is brought to you by CapGemini.